Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I'm so happy to have Olga Mecking with us. And I want to tell you a little bit about Olga. She's a writer, journalist, and occasional translator. Originally from Poland, she now lives with her German husband and 3 multilingual children in the Netherlands. She has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Guardian, and the BBC, among others. The U.S. edition of her book, NIksen, Embracing the Dutch Art of Doing Nothing, was published in 2021 by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. NIksen has also appeared in 14 languages and several countries around the world. When not writing or thinking about writing, Olga can be found reading books, drinking tea, and doing nothing. And she has written paranormal fantasy books with women protagonists, mothers and daughters, grandmothers, and she self-published those. Welcome, Olga.
Thank you for having me.
So we have a lot to talk about. First of all, we met, I think, through social media, and I was very familiar with your work, your articles, your research and science and parenting focused features. And then you took a class with me on essay writing at Writer's Digest. So I got a chance to get to know you even better. And I'm excited about your new work because you're doing something that I think a lot of people are afraid to do. They're switching genres, they're switching publishing models. But I say in today's wide west world of publishing, that's okay to do. And you're really experiencing a different part of your interests and your writing. So let's talk about it. Talk about, why you decided to explore the paranormal and why you decided to explore self-publishing.
Yeah, so there's several reasons. I've always I read lots of novels. I read a lot generally, but among that, lots of novels. And I think if you read a lot of novels, it would make sense to want to write one. And I've been thinking about that for a while now. And, NIksen, my nonfiction book, it was self-help. It was a how-to book on wellness in the Netherlands, and of course the research. And it was interesting to write that, obviously. And then because of the pandemic, I thought, oh, I'm going to try something new. And the paranormal is because I'm a big reader of science fiction and fantasy in general. I do not, however, have lots of visual imagination. So I don't think I would have been able to make up a whole new world by myself from scratch. But I kind of based it in reality. It's our world, it's the Netherlands, but it still has magic. And just a few words about the genre of paranormal women's fiction, because maybe many listeners will not know about this. Usually when you read lots of fantasy, you will have noticed that in fantasy books, the protagonist is quite often either a teenager or young adult. Most of those stories are, coming of age stories. And a few writers got really annoyed with that and decided to start their own genre called paranormal women's fiction, featuring women protagonists in their 30s and 40s with grown children or raising teenagers or having aging parents, but also that with magic. So that's the idea behind it.
So you decided you love reading paranormal fantasy books. Like, what are some of your favorites that you like?
So it's not only paranormal, I just like fantasy and science fiction in general. So some of those I really enjoyed was The Expanse, which is science fiction. Also, there's our amazing series on Prime. There's one I'm really enjoying called The Dresden Files, which is urban fantasy set in Chicago. And it's a wizard who he goes on adventures and he solves crimes. Essentially, he's like a detective but for magic. There's a series I like called The Hollows, also urban fantasy set in Cincinnati. There's lots of books that I like, and a lot of it is fantasy. So it's just I read everything.
So you've decided on doing a family saga, right? You do a family story, and you have different titles. Like your first one that came out was called Nellie's Fire, a paranormal women's fiction fantasy. After that, you had Cornelia's Home and Nehelenia's Daughters. And Nehelenia is like this goddess of the sea that is
Yeah.
an important character throughout. And then your third book is Johanna's Spirit. And so
Yeah.
they're all connected and they're all witches. And so,
Yes.
how did you world build? I mean, aside from knowing the Netherlands and knowing, what you can put in there, what you have to world build in a novel, especially when it has to do with fantasy. Did you figure out rules? And look, you have a scientific mind. You've done a lot of pieces research focused. So how did you research that? Or could you even research that?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about it, because every part of the series takes place in a different era, the world is also a different one in each part. So actually, I had to make up a whole new world for each book in the series. And the way I did, I really started with what I knew about the Netherlands. So a lot of the things you read about was inspired by something I've read or experienced myself. So like the swimming pool, they take swimming classes in, right? It's the one my kids took swimming classes in. It's very reality based. And I also took a look, like, because I'm familiar with that society, I knew, for example, that paranormal beings, or as I call them, unusuals, they wouldn't be shunned or anything or persecuted, but they wouldn't be accepted, they would be tolerated. Maybe a bit, like, comparable to the situation of, for example, immigrants. I'm making lots of those parallels in the books as well.
Did you, I don't know, make a list for yourself of rules of the world? Or because you're continuing a saga. And so if one of them is doing a certain type of magic, and then she's appearing again as a character in the book, wouldn't you have her, do the same type of magic or have the same skill set? Like, how do you make sure the continuity is happening there?
Yeah, so I kind of thought, okay, in every fantasy book, you need to figure out how does the magic work? What are the rules? And in my case, because my witches, they're quite, because they've been blessed by a goddess, right? So they're also a bit different from other witches. I've kind of thought, okay, maybe they'll have a system for breathing, for eating, for a nervous system. They have a magic system through which the magic kind of flows and through which they can do what they can do. And as for the continuity, it was actually something I grappled with, because usually when you write a series, you either have the same protagonist in every book, like in the Dresden Files, Harry Dresden has a different adventure in every book. And there's a bigger arc as well, yes, but same protagonist, different adventure. Or you have something like The Seven Sisters by Lucinda Riley, which is not fantasy, it's historical romance, but she has seven sisters, or they're adopted, but they're sisters. Each book tells the story of a different sister. When I was reading her series, I thought, oh my God, if, I don't know, Maya, for example, the protagonist of her first book, says something in book one to her sister Ali or whatever, she will have to remember what was said in that scene, because the book two or three is gonna be from Ali's perspective, and she will have to remember that. And I knew I wouldn't be able to track that. I would not be able to keep track of that. So what I did, I set the books more or less 30 years apart, just to avoid having this problem. So sometimes you'll have mention of, oh yeah, my mother did this or my grandfather did that, but
Right.
there's just mentioned. I don't have to show the whole conversation from a different angle or even remember what was exactly said. I can rephrase it. which is the reason why I did the series the way I did it, because people say, oh, you kind of did it the hard way. For me, it was the easy way.
So
because I
they're
didn't.
so much older or younger or not even around anymore
Yeah,
that it doesn't make a
exactly.
difference. NIksen was like traditional publisher
Yeah.
and had translations in many languages, came out in many countries. And this is you, soup to nuts. You're picking the covers, you're doing all the writing. You may have some help in the copy editing department, but you're doing all the publicity. It's like a one-man show, or is it? How does it work? And how is that different for you?
So NIksen was traditionally published with a big publisher in the Netherlands, and then translation and publishing rights being sold to other publishers all over the world. And I'm just gonna say, if you work with a publisher, it's their job to know how this book is gonna look like. And I was very happy to have that kind of help, that I didn't have to come up with a cover, for example. I'm not very visual, so that's a problem. I knew that would be a problem. I couldn't, like, if they asked me what sort of cover would you like for this book, I had no idea. I wouldn't have known what to say. So yes, they did the editing, they did formatting, also a big problem for me. I hate it. It's not something I like doing. They did that, which is also amazing, make the book look super pretty. However, if you work with a publisher, there's rules and there's deadlines. And at some point, they cut off a month of my writing time just because the competition was coming up with a similar title and they wanted to be first. So it was amazing, an amazing opportunity, still is, but also very stressful. With self-publishing, there's a lot of responsibility, resting on your shoulders, but there's also lots of freedom in that. I don't think that any publisher would be interested in a series that spans several generations. I read a lot of books and I've only seen it done once. I think Practical Magic is a book that has different generation, also of witches. It's
Yes,
an
yes.
amazing book and I really recommend it. But otherwise, I have not seen it done that way. And then because it's based in the Netherlands, I could make my protagonist Dutch and I could make them say funny things that, maybe people wouldn't say, like swear with diseases. People would actually point that out to me. Why is she saying, oh, get the cholera or something like that? And that's the way Dutch people swear, actually, which is why she's saying that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you use like common vernacular, but it's something that you wanted to use and you didn't have to run it by anybody else or a copy editor or
Exactly.
something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I probably have made several mistakes that would get, an editor will say, I would never do that. But it was something I did, right? So it was really freeing to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So, Olga, you have so many themes running through your series. You have family, magic, historical facts about the Netherlands and the dams and the ocean. And how did you decide on the themes for your series?
Honestly, I didn't. It was all based on what I've experienced or what I've have researched, because I've done lots of research about the sea for, some of my stories. For example, the goddess Helena. I've done so much research about her that I've also used that to write 2 articles about her. So I think family and generally the relationship between mothers and daughters is also a big theme running throughout the series. And I guess that's because I have 2 daughters myself and they're very different, and so the relationship we have is also very different. However, there's also the thing of like being scared of losing your child. I think that's also a big topic in the books, and that was based on my own experience of having the police called on me when my eldest daughter was very small. So it's something that never leaves you, and I use that fear or that experience to explore what does it mean if it could happen, what does it do to a parent, and yeah.
I remember when you wrote that piece. I remember that. Yeah. So that's great that you were able to imbue those real life bits of information and pieces from your life into it. And did you base Nellie on yourself or Joanna or a little bit of each of them?
People think I did. People say, oh, there's some similarities maybe between you two, but no, I think we're the very different people. What I built their personalities on is because they're elemental witches. So the titles, they point to the elements. So Nelly's fire, obviously, Anna's tides, water, Haley's storm, air, Cornelia's home, earth, and Johanna's spirit, ether or spirit. I consider that an element. And so I kind of base their personalities on the element they master. And so, for example, Nellie is a fire witch. She's very, very loyal, but also quick to anger. And she's very spontaneous.
Yes. And I like how when she would get angry, like she'd get hot, but she didn't really understand it at first, the magic, and then started understanding more about it. And there was a lot of that discovering of the elemental properties of each of the witches. And even like Johanna didn't even really know what her gift was as a witch until much later on in the series. And so for you, it's a big difference publishing traditionally, publishing, self-publishing. Would you go back to traditional publishing for a different kind of book?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I would. I would love to be able to write, to get a chance or the opportunity to write a book about parenting. Not necessarily, how-to guide or how to parent, how not to parent, just more, why is it so hard? How did we get her kind of thing? Because there's some genres in fiction that are great for self-publishing. Fantasy, romance is a great example. But for nonfiction, especially if you have to do lots of research, that's better with a traditional publisher, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree on that. And in terms of the self-publishing, if somebody is going to self-publish, what are the steps you would recommend, or something that maybe you learned that was challenging that you didn't expect to find in the process?
So what I found is actually the opposite. I was actually really surprised how many tools there were out there for self-publishing writers. For example, I've got this software called Atticus. It formats your book and makes them look really pretty, and you can add like decorative elements and choose your font and how the chapters are gonna look like. It's for formatting, but you also can use it to write in. So it has the steps so you can kind of the chapters and scenes, and it's super easy to use, very intuitive. I was very happy because, as I mentioned before, formatting is something I do not like at all. And
Agreed.
having a problem like that where I can make my own book, look really pretty. And if you got the print version, but also in the ebook, I think there's little symbols at the beginning of every chapter. There's like a symbol, and it goes with the element.
Of the element, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then like fire has a little flame and water has a little water drop. And you can make that. And also with Canva, this kind of design program, also very easy to use. So there's lots of really cool tools out there. Most of them, Atticus, it's not for free, but it's like one payment. So it's not like a subscription. You pay once and then you have it.
How did you do the cover design? Did you
I
hire
did not.
someone or
Yeah, I hired someone. So they're called Get Covers, and I send them a list of like some examples. These are the covers I like. So for example, I do not like people on covers, especially fantasy covers. I don't know why, I just don't like it. So I said no people on my covers. Like there's trends in cover design. So I had a different cover made three years back. But by the time I was ready to publish the first book, the cover went out of fashion, or that design went out of fashion, so I had to change completely. And now I'm super happy with the covers because they're so pretty and they work together as a series. So this is what people do. Like it's a job, right? So there's people doing that, and they're not all very expensive.
in terms of the writing, did you use Scriveners?
Yeah, but I think I just used the very basic functions, nothing fancy. But I wrote it in Scrivener and then I sent it to my editor. So I don't know if you don't have a lot of money and you need to kind of be careful with what you're spending, then if you need to splurge on something, then splurge on a good editor.
And how did
That's
you
what
find your editor?
she came highly recommended by a friend. So I went with her, and she was also very affordable. So
Okay.
I went with her. She's based in Italy.
And then are you going to do another series or you're not sure?
I'm not sure. I do have a book planned, but also fantasy, but different. So that's urban fantasy. So
Yeah.
based in my hometown of Warsaw, Poland. That's the idea, but it's more like urban fantasy slash mystery, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know how I feel about sharing that, but I'm pregnant, so I'm gonna have a different project to work on.
Oh my goodness, well, this is so exciting.
Really want to do the parenting book because I've been a parent for so long and I've been thinking and writing about it for so long. And
I
now I kind of
know.
have a reason to think about again. do want to do the urban fantasy book based in Warsaw, because most of what you read in English, it's, it's
Yeah.
magic but in London, or it's magic but in New York, or it's magic but in some American or British city.
Yes.
And Warsaw has lots of cool stories and legends to kind of be inspired by.
That's wonderful. Was there anything that you wanted to say that I didn't ask you?
Yeah, maybe I just want to add that nonfiction and fiction writing are quite different. Because in fiction, you have to kind of create a whole world from scratch, more or less. I can use existing elements, but it's all you, right? Like, for example, you as an essay writer, you already use fiction techniques in your essay writing. You use scenes and setting and dialogue. There's an overlap between those two. And I think you can use one to learn. If you're writing nonfiction and you want to write fiction, then you can learn from what you've written. So I have learned a lot from, doing the research for my articles and my book. And I
Yes.
use that in my novels.
Yes. And I mean, even in terms of, I'm working on memoir, I'm also working on a novel, but I'm working on memoir kind of
Exactly.
first, I think. And the idea is write a memoir like a novel, not
Yeah.
make it up, but it needs to really kind of grab you with scenes and with
Yeah.
dialogue and with the movement and the threads throughout,
Yeah.
the through lines.
Exactly. And the themes, a story is a story. And when the book, The Happiest Girl in the World, I think it was called, came out, it became super popular. And I read reviews when people said journalists are really good at writing novels because they know how a story is structured.
Interesting. Did you like read any book that helped you write your fiction?
Oh, I read lots of books. So for me, I knew I had to have a structure, like not a structure, but just a plan. So I figured out what are the most important scenes in my novels and how am I gonna get my protagonist from the beginning till the end, going through those points.
Excellent. Did you write it out on white paper?
I used flashcards, and every flashcard was a scene. And there's this idea, I don't remember by whom, that I found very helpful, that in each scene, something has to happen, and the protagonist has to react to it and has to make a decision what to do next. And the next scene has to build on that scene. So it's all very logical. You say, writing novel is all muse and inspiration, but it's actually for me, it was quite a logical process. And
Yes.
you also get some genre specific things where I don't know, in crime, there has to be a body, or there has to be interviewing witnesses, and there has to be some things that people expect. In romance, they have to meet and they have to argue and they have to, separate, and then they have to get together again. The
Yes.
question is how. And so if you know about the genre and what people expect from reading your book, then it's easy for you to write.
That's great. That's great. It's really been a pleasure talking with you and congratulations on your
Thank you
news.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.